Welcome to Youth Voices of Greater Cincinnati. My name is Jasmine Garcia.
And my name is Shiley Cruz.
We are 8th graders at Norwood Middle School, and today we have a very special guest. He is an immigration attorney in Cincinnati, Mr. Fee.
Thank you both for having me come in as your guest.
So basically, what would you say DACA is?
Well, DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And what it is a program that was started by President Obama through an executive order. An executive order is the president determining what's going to be, as opposed to a law that would come from Congress. And in the case of DACA, deferred action, the first two parts of the word, really means that it is people who would be subject to being deported. They will not take action, the government will not take action against them right away. They'll defer that. And who are the people? Childhood arrivals. So it's a specific age group of people who arrived at a specific time to the United States without having the proper documentation.
When did DACA begin?
DACA began through a presidential decree that President Obama gave a speech. I believe it was on the 15th of June of 2012. And it took a couple of months for the people in immigration to write out all of the regulations that came from his speech. And it started to get implemented probably the second half of August of 2012.
So what are the requirements for DACA that people have to do?
Well, okay, the requirements to be eligible. It's really sort of about 5 different categories, and the first category is age, and age has a few different components. In order to be eligible for DACA, you had to have been born after the 15th of June 1981. So when President Obama gave his speech, you had to be under the age of 31. You also had to have entered the United States before you were 16 years of age. And for the most part, to be eligible to apply, you have to be 15 years of age or older, unless you were already in removal proceedings. In other words, if the government was already trying to deport you. So there was kind of and I guess there still is, a block of age of which people could apply. You had to also have arrived at the United States at least 5 years before the president gave his speech. So that would have been arrived before the 15th of June of 2007. You had to have been what they would call a person of good moral character. What does that mean? It means that you can't have had a felony conviction. You can't have had a serious misdemeanor conviction, something that would be akin to a dangerous crime of violence, say domestic violence or a drunk driving, things like that. Or you couldn't have had 3 or more lesser misdemeanors, which would be smaller crimes. So all of those are important. And also on the date that the president gave his speech, you had to be out of your official government status. And that means that if you came here on a visa and the visa says that you had to leave by such and such a date, that date had to be before the president gave his speech. So before the 15th of June of 2012. And I know it's kind of crazy, all of those different things. They wanted people to have already graduated from high school, or at least been in high school, enrolled, or taking a GED. And if you hadn't done that, they wanted to make it eligible for people who had served in the U.S. military and gotten a honorable discharge, which means that you completed your service with the government and everything went well during that time that you were working with the military. So those are the eligibility. And I don't know, have you had any personal contact with DACA? Has it affected your families at all?
Well, my family, my cousin has a DACA. It makes his life a little bit easier because it helps him work and go to school and not have to worry about what is going to happen to him the next day or what he has to do. So he said it helps him a lot.
Yeah.
I also have family with DACA. I have a few cousins on both my parents' side, on my mom's and my dad's side. One of my cousins actually just graduated from Norwood High School last year, and he's working, and I don't have to worry, like Shiley said, about my cousins because I know that they're protected.
Right. And the DACA program was initially for a 2-year period. You've been able to have it renewed every other year since it was implemented in 2012. So I have clients who 2012 to 2014, 2014 to 2016, 2016 to 2018, and now they're getting their 2018 to 2020. So this would be the fourth time that they've had it. There was a brief period in which they were giving a 3-year period rather than 2-year, but that was in 2014 and it only lasted for about 3 months. So anyone who would have gotten the 3-year is now back on the 2-year rotation.
Have the requirements for eligibility always been the same, or has any of them ever changed?
Yes and no. President Obama attempted to change them once again. So he was the one who came out with the eligibility requirements that I just went over in 2012. And then in November of 2014, so a little more than 2 years after his first DACA presidential edict, he came back and he said, okay, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get rid of the maximum age. So anyone who was over age 31, the date that he gave his initial DACA speech, was not eligible. He would like to have made those people eligible. So let's say that you were born in 1980 and you went through high school and all of that. Everything would have been fine except that you were just too old. So he wanted to get rid of that upper age limit. He also wanted to make it eligible for a 3-year rather than a 2-year period. And he wanted to allow people who had come to the United States before the year 2010. So if you had come in the second half of 2007, anytime in 2008, or anytime in 2009, you would have been eligible. And that would have been for, we would call it an enhanced DACA. And that did not go through. There were a few states that challenged it in the courts. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the decision in the Supreme Court was 4-4. Normally there are 9 justices, but at the beginning of 2016, one of the older justices, Scalia, died. So there was a period of about 1 year in which there were only 8 justices. And it was during that year that the DACA case came up, and it tied 4-4. And when it's a tie, whatever happened at the lower court is what stays. And the lower court said that the DACA decision to make it broader and enhance it could not go through. And so they had to go back to the original DACA.
Okay. What is the earliest age you can get a DACA at?
Well, technically you could really get it almost as a baby or an infant, because if you were, if you passed all of the other requirements, in other words, if you came to the United States before age 16 and you were here as of the date in 2007, well, I guess by the time it would have come up in 2012, you would have been 5 years old. So that would have been the youngest. But there have been cases of young children who were placed in removal proceedings. Maybe they came with their family and everyone was stopped at the border. And some of the older people had been already in a process, and now it was coming time for the younger children. And because they were under the age of 15, they could apply for DACA. So that technically the youngest could have been 5, but typically most people would apply for DACA at age 15. One of the big things is that it gives you a work permit. So obviously if you're 5 or 6 years old, there's really not much you can do. But if you're a teenager, you might want to work after school or things like that. And so it's much more valuable to a person who's a little bit older.
What is the maximum age to get DACA?
The maximum age would have been someone who was born prior to or after June 15th of 1981. So if you were born on June 16th, 1981, you would be the oldest person who could possibly get DACA. And as they're continuing to renew it, you would still be getting older each time, but the birth date would have been June 16th, 1981 would be the oldest people eligible.
Okay. At what age do most people apply for their DACA or get their DACA at?
Well, as I said, because of the way in which it's structured, most people would apply for it let's say, in their last few years of high school, their college years, or in their 20s. So most people who I was working with started working with them at age 16, 17, 19, 22, right around in there.
How long does it take to receive your DACA?
Well, the process depends a little bit on each person's past history. So if you're a person who's never had any contacts with the law, it can be pretty quick. It can take as short as maybe 2 to 3 months. If you have a criminal record, and remember, these would only be for minor types of offenses, the misdemeanors, it can take longer because you have to not only present all of the evidence for the people making a decision on DACA, you have to get your certified copies from the court, you have to get the police reports, but you also have to explain to the people making the decision why you should get DACA. And so they'll go over all of those papers and they will make a decision, and in some cases it might take 6 months or 8 months for them to make up their mind.
So when you do get your DACA, what are the things you can't and can't do with it?
Okay. What you can do, and that's the most important thing, I think, is that you can use it to get a state ID. So you can get your Ohio identification, and if you're 18 or older, or have parents who are legal residents and you're younger, say at 16, you can get a driver's license. You can also use it to get a United States Social Security card. And with the DACA and the Social Security card, you can get a job. So that's very, very important. You can also use it as a form of proof that you are allowed to work anywhere in the United States. So you can travel around the United States with the IDs that you get and work in the United States. What you can't do, you can't use it to leave the United States. There is a way, or was a way I should say, because it's no longer available, but there was a way in which you used to be able to take DACA and be able to travel outside the United States for one of 3 things. One would be education. So let's say you're in college and the class you're taking has a trip going to another country. All of the people in your class are going, it's part of what you want to study, and so you could make an application to the government saying, I'm in this school, I'm doing these types of studies, and I need to go as part of my studies outside the United States. Another thing would be is if it were work related. So let's say you get a job and you're working for General Electric or something, and they want to send you down to one of their overseas offices, maybe send you to Venezuela or send you to Colombia, something like that. You might be able to make the application and receive that. And the third would be what they call humanitarian. So if you have a relative back in your home country who's very ill, or someone who's died, let's say maybe your grandmother died and they want you to attend the funeral, that would be another reason. It's not so you can take vacations or things like that, but for one of those 3 reasons, you would be able to make the application. And that was for, let's say, the first 5 years of DACA. When President Trump came in, he changed that, and you can no longer leave the country.
How much papers do you need to fill out in order to get your DACA?
It's really not all that much. It's a application that, for me, because I do a lot of them, probably only takes about half an hour, 45 minutes. It varies because the forms have changed a little over the years, but it's anywhere from about 4 to 8 pages of information. If people have had, as I say, things like a criminal record, it's a bit more involved because you have to get the other type of information. But, if you're, let's say, 16 years old and in high school, things are, I just need to show your birth certificate that you weren't born here. We'll get your school records that show that, you started school in 3rd grade here when you came at age 8, and you're now a senior, so I can show all of those school records. Where you've lived, we just have to put a list of the houses where you've lived in those years since you've been here, and pretty much say that you have no criminal record, and off it goes. So it's not a big process.
Okay. Do most people who apply for DACA get their DACA?
That's a very good question, because I have seen, different statistics, and from my own personal working with people in their application. I think statistically it's about 85 to 90% of the people who apply get it. It's been, and I looked over my records, I've got about a 99%. I've only had one person rejected. And the reason that they were rejected had to do with the exact date that they entered the United States. They entered sometime around their 16th birthday, but we couldn't prove that they were here before their 16th birthday. And that was part of the requirements to be eligible for DACA.
Do you have to go to a certain state to get DACA, or is it available in any state?
It's available in all the states and U.S. territories. So if you're in a territory like Puerto Rico, you can also apply for it, as well as the 50 states.
Once you receive your DACA, what can you do with it exactly?
Well, it's just a card. Okay, so that's what you would use. You would take that card. The first thing most people do is they take that card and they go to Social Security and they say, look, I have a DACA card. I want to apply for a Social Security card. So with a Social Security card and the DACA card, then you can get a job. So that's a really big thing. And also with the Social Security card and the DACA card, you can make an application to get your driver's license. That's generally what most people do first.
Okay.
If you have DACA, can it be taken away?
It can. Remember, part of the problem in giving people DACA is that they have to show that they're good moral character. And so if you get a criminal conviction for a felony, or if you get a criminal conviction for a serious misdemeanor, something like drunk driving, they can't take the DACA away.
Is a visa and a DACA kind of the same thing?
Not quite. A visa is generally a permission that the United States government gives people to enter the country. A DACA is something, if you're already here, it just is a way in which they say, okay, we're not going to try to remove you from this country. We know that if you came on a visa, the visa's expired, or your permission to be here is over, but we're going to allow you to live here and work here, at least temporarily, with DACA.
What were your thoughts when you found out about DACA?
Well, when I first found out about it, I was very, very happy because there had been probably 3 big attempts before to help out people who had come here as children. I'm sure you've heard of the DREAM Act, or Dreamers.
Yeah.
And these are people who, for many years, they'd come to the United States as children and they'd not been able to get a work permit, or they'd not been able to get Social Security cards. And there were a couple of attempts that President Bush did to try to get them legal, but it didn't work because Congress would not pass the law. So when the time President Obama came in, Congress was still saying, we're not going to pass the law. But what President Obama did is he said, okay, I just have to enforce the law, but I'm going to enforce it in this way because there's so many people here and we can't deport everybody. I'm going to give some, what I call low-level priority people for deportation. I'm going to give them the opportunity to work here and to stay here, and that is what the deferred action part is. And he limited it, as we've gone over, to only people who would be eligible, so it was mostly younger people. And it's not a 100% cure-all, and it's something that even today we have to worry about it being taken away, but at this stage it's provided about 6 or 7 years of help for people who otherwise would not have that.
Why did you want to help people get their DACA?
Well, I'd say primarily what you want to do to have people help them get the DACA is that so they can be very productive members of our society. You guys are here, you're going through school. If you have cousins who have DACA, they were also going to school. You as citizens, as soon as you get out of school, could get jobs and can start working, but your cousins, when they didn't have DACA, couldn't do that. So it was very frustrating for them because a lot of times they couldn't go on to college if they were good students because they didn't have a Social Security number, or they couldn't get a good job because no one would hire them because they didn't have work authorization. So it's something that I felt very happy to be a part of once it was possible to start DACA.
What are your thoughts on the current DACA situation?
Well, I am a little worried about it. President Trump has tried to stop it. He tried to stop it last September. not this year, but September of 2017. And there was a period in which they were not renewing anyone. There is also a period in which the people who had originally been eligible but never had applied could not apply. And right now it's sort of going through the court system again, and people are able to renew their DACA, and they're able right now to make that initial DACA request if they've never done it before. So it's not out of the woods, but it's much better than it was a year ago. But I still don't know what's going to happen, because once the cases get eventually to the Supreme Court, they will make up their mind. The last time it was 4-4. I don't know what would happen when it gets there this time.
In your opinion, do you think DACA changes lives for the better?
I think if people take advantage of it and, they go from not being able to work and be productive members of society to being productive members, yes, it can very well have a positive influence on their lives. For the people who just use it to go out and buy beer and drive around and get picked up drunk driving, no, obviously it's not good for them, and it's not good for society. So it's something that you really have to care for every day. If you get DACA, you have to realize that you're receiving this benefit, and it's not for everybody, and you should be grateful for it, and work as hard as you can to better yourself. And it's an opportunity for people who receive it, and they should see it as something that's really, really beneficial for them, and a way that they can move themselves up the society or up the economic ladder, and help out not only themselves but other members of their family. Because if you're not working, someone's having to take care of you. And so it makes it harder on their parents, it makes it harder on their siblings if that person can't work. So it's something that can really, really help, but the people who receive it have to put in their part as well.
Before we leave, would you have any questions you would like to ask me and Jasmine?
Well, you both told me that you have family members who have received DACA. Are they working now? Are they going to school? What are your family members doing?
Well, right now, my cousin, he's working, and he just bought a house with the money he's been saving up in his bank account for his family, because he feels like he should buy a house for his family because his family did so much for him. And he's also in college for animations.
Okay, so he's doing a lot of things to better himself. He's continuing his education, he's working, he's investing in his future by buying a house. That's excellent.
For my cousins, I can really think of 3 off the top of my head that have DACA. On my dad's side, I have a cousin. She is in the Army. She has her DACA. And on my mom's side, I have 2 male cousins. One of them recently graduated from Norwood High School, and he's currently working and he actually got a scholarship to college. And then his younger brother, he's a senior this year.
Okay, so everyone's taking advantage as well. You used to be able to enter the Army if you came on certain types of visas. If you came in undocumented, they wouldn't let you in, but DACA allows for that. So you can say that your cousin probably would not have been able to get in the Army without DACA. So that's very, very helpful. And a lot of times the Army has benefits. Once you finish your service, you can get assistance in going to college and things like that. And there are ways of helping out as well with the VA, Veterans Administration, things such as health care and things like that. So it's a very good thing to have if you successfully complete your military service.
I want to say thank you for coming and teaching us more about DACA.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. I hope you learned something. It's always fun to tell people a little bit about what I do and to see how it impacts their lives as well.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.